Hi everyone, welcome to this podcast on the writing review for the GCSE English language on the WJEC board. This is the last topic we'll be looking at, as we've covered all the others in the other videos, so please look at my videos if you want to see them. So hopefully our review will be a bit deeper, a bit more successful than Homer's here, and a bit more depth to it. So this was a starter reading class. Basically I was just asking you to get sort of your top marks, what do you need to include in your review, and it's basically just all the other things that you need to include in your other writing marks. So you get 13 for your content, and 7 for your spelling, punctuation and grammar. So here's a video that we've watched for every other unit. I put the link on YouTube so you can have a look at it. So here are the things we should have learned from watching the video. So if you want to pause the video and we can get a definition for review writing. A review is a piece of writing which gives an opinion about a new book, film, music. Of the WJEC examples I've seen so far, the questions tend to be either a film review or a book review, like it says here, or it can be a review of the town you live in. So it could be Bournemouth or somewhere in Dorset. However, the examiner doesn't know where you live, so you could do about New York or Las Vegas or the Bahamas, wherever you wanted to write a review. So you should begin your review with a catchy and interesting headline, and you should have a general introduction which helps to set the scene. So if any of you were in my article lessons or have watched the video on the article, it's actually set out the same way as an article, where you have a catchy, interesting heading which you could use alliteration for, you could use paragraph 3, you could use rhetorical question, and then your little few lines after that, your first few lines, almost is a little bit of a spoiler for the reader to tell them what the rest of the article is going to be about. So your review should end with a clear opinion, a final recommendation, so should the reader read the book, should the person go and watch the film, and a rating, e.g. stars or marks out of 10. So if you look at most book reviews or most film reviews, they might do how many popcorns out of 10, or the most common is stars out of 5. So here's a typical exam question. Teen View, a magazine for teenagers, wants to publish lively reviews from its readers. Write a review of film or TV program you've watched or a book you have read. So like I said before, it's normally a film or book review, and there's two important things to note, and it's the same as it was with the article. So it's, first of all, it's important to note it's a magazine for teenagers, so you're going to be writing for people your age, so your language should reflect that. The other important thing to look at is the adjective. It's not just a review, it's a lively review. So this is the same as the article when it was a lively article. So this is basically the examiner telling you that you need to make it interesting, you may need to make it lively, you need to sort of try to entertain the examiner. So like of all things, it should be about 1 to 2 pages on the left. So the examiner's report, so I've summed up the examiner's report so we don't have to go through it like we have with other ones. So the examiner says you should have a clear understanding of audience. So we know this one is made for teenagers, so your language should reflect that. You shouldn't continually talk about the story. So you will have one section in maybe 2 or 3 lines or one small paragraph where you're going to be talking about the plot of the film. However, you're not going to give the ending away, because the whole point of reading review is for someone to find out about the film. I don't want the end given away. You shouldn't comment on the narrative all the way through. The point of the review is that you are analysing it and you're saying the good and bad parts and whether you'd recommend it or not. Number 3, obviously in a review it's going to be your opinion. By definition, that's what a review is. It's someone saying whether he or she likes something. So enthusiasm. So if you're talking about the best book you've ever read or the best film you've ever seen, you're going to be enthusiastic. You're going to try to make it interesting and make sure that enthusiasm comes across. What you want to do is you want to pick something that you either absolutely love or absolutely hate. You shouldn't really pick something that you're not too bothered about, because that will probably come across in your writing. So number 5, there's no real excuse, the examiner says, for writing less than 3/4 of a page. I've told you that I really want you to write about 1.5 pages, but like I've just said, the examiner says if it's less than 3/4 of a page or 3/4 of a page, they will probably think that you're not bothered and you show no interest in the writing, and their mark will probably reflect that. Number 6, no basic errors. So you've got to make sure your there, and they are's are correct. Correct too. Spell checks actually corrected this on my PowerPoint, but a lot of basic errors in this question were that people spelt review wrong, so they got the E and the I the wrong way around, and also people were putting an O instead of an E here for character. So really basic errors you've got to cut out, because that will affect you getting into the higher bands. Okay, so here's the definitions. I'll quickly just tell you that the bottom one is the correct definition. A review is usually a written article, gives your opinion on something. And here's our POW. I've wanted to talk about POW all the way through. So our purpose in an interview, to provide information and give judgment. But we've already been told it's a lively, so you're going to entertain as well. The audience is going to be people your age. So the language, you should be using informal language, the forest, and opinions, and we're going to talk about adjectives in a minute. And your layout should be similar to the article. You should have a headline and a heading, and then a summed up introduction. Okay, here's a structure for your review that you can use. So you've got a title, which I want you to try to make interesting, maybe use alliteration. Then in the first few sentences, you're going to sum up, like I said, and you're going to give your basic opinion. And then for the next few paragraphs, you're going to basically give me a few points about the film, that why you really like it. And then you may do one paragraph towards the end, where it's almost like second guessing, like we talked about the letter, where you're going to give a small paragraph saying your the opposing view. So, for example, you love the film for many reasons, but you could say, however. Or one thing it could be improved is that one character was annoying, or maybe it went on too long. Okay, so then you're going to give your score rating. Okay, so adjectives. Okay, so in other words, describing words. So my apple tastes funny, so funny being the adjective. So here's lots of adjectives. So as you are looking for the higher grade, you're not going to just say the film is rubbish, or the film is boring, or the film is good. Try to use, like, if it's good, mesmerizing, absorbing, compelling, awesome, enthralling. If it's bad, you could say it's woeful, appalling, dismal. So here's an example. This is a D grade. So I won't read it through, but have a read through yourself and have a read through about the examiner's comments. This is the same with the A grade. Have a read through, see what the examiner is saying. Straight away, though, we can see it's got a bit more depth to it. It's got some interesting subheadings where they all use rhetorical questions, which is a good technique. And it's just basically very well written, but I'll leave you to read it through. So we looked at this in the lesson. So what kind of language is used? Is it formal or informal? Who is it aimed at? So if you're writing your review to people your age, it's probably going to be informal, but feel free to add a subtitle for each paragraph. That will help structure your writing. Before sunset, I've given you all revision packs for the film review. One of the reviews is Before Sunset, which I know a lot of you didn't like the look of, but it's a very interesting film. So this is from the Roger Ebert website. I've actually copied this from that website. He's a very was a very well-respected film review critic. So here it is. So this is obviously would be an A star, but it's really interesting how it's set out. So we've got the plot up here, and then we've got the review down here, and the stars at the end. So a few aspects of this. This is my annotated version that you've also got. So simply stunning sunsets. So first of all, we've got alliteration. So here we've got the plot underlined, so it's got a simple and clear structure. It starts with 9 years have passed since Jesse and Celine met in Vienna and walked over the city. So I will put the trailer up for people to give you a bit of an idea what the film is about. So it's an interesting first line. It takes the reader straight into the film. Were you there in Vienna in December? So it gives a quote from the film, which you could definitely do in yours. And then it ends with, they begin to talk again in a rush before he must leave his flight to catch his flight to America. So that's a very brief outline of the plot. So instead of doing what a lot of D grade students do, is just describe the plot in nearly about 2 or 3 paragraphs, it's literally 3 lines. So again, we've got another subheading, simple, clear. Before sunset continues the compulsive conversation. So alliteration, we've got a statistic here or a fact here about when it was made, and there's got lots of emotive, lots of adjectives through, so I'll let you have a read of that. It's also got power of free, open, spontaneous, hopeful, and it's also got the other side of it saying what a weakness, and it ends with a catchy quote. But feel free to read it through in detail a bit more. Another one we're looking at, this is a student example. A star is a Revenge of the Sith, the Star Wars film. So here it is, have a read through, and here are my notes. I will quickly go through it. So it starts with a little play on words. The film, like I said, is called Revenge of the Sith. So this is the Revenge of mediocrity, so and it's the revenge of it's a bit boring. It's not a particularly great film. So after the disappointment of the 99's highly anticipated prequel, so it starts with a few adjectives and statistics. We've got power of free here, noisy, shallow, virtually pointless mess. It's split again into different sections, lots of adjectives, lots of direct address, so it means you probably be better at sitting at home staring at a computer scene, so it gets the reader involved. Also direct address to the director at the end, which is quite interesting, talking to the director, and it gives a rating. But it's also spelling, punctuation and grammar wise, it's pretty much perfect. Interesting sentence and paragraph starters, use connectives, complex sentences. and it doesn't use too much complex punctuation. I guess you could argue it uses brackets, but it's just very well written and there's not too many mistakes. Here they've got a metaphor where they're comparing the plot to a metaphor. So remember, if you're comparing something to something, it's normally going to be a metaphor. If they use as or like something, then it's a simile. Here's another A-star review that I found on Breaking Bad. Oh, it's all gone wrong. Breaking news, you're missing out on Breaking Bad. So almost like a newspaper heading, but because it's breaking news, Breaking Bad, it's a very clever way of starting it. Again, this one's written really well, and the examiner tells us it's a sophisticated and confident review. Assumes sense of audience and purpose. Vocab choices are really good, and stylistic devices. So this is our DeForest are used more effectively. So this is another really good one. So have a read through, but it's got a stonking 4 stars. So it uses a lot of emotive language, uses some really good adjectives, it uses rhetorical questions. Where have you been the past year? So again, it's a direct address. So it uses interesting sentence starters, so inevitably. So like I said before, I want you to try and use sentence starters which words ending in ly and ending in ing. So down here we've got Power of 3. Throughout the series you can watch Walter transition from a loving 1, caring 2 and slightly goofy 3 father. So it's a very well written piece of work which is very mature. You can see up here it's got perfect marks. It's got 7 for the spag and 13 for the content. So I want you to answer these questions. When you write a review, it is important to have a think of which one. I'm going to go through it quickly, so just pause. So it's important to make your opinion clear. So by the end of that review, the reader needs to know whether this film is good, bad or in the middle. When you write a review, it is important to so use ambitious language. To go up those bands, you've got to try to push yourself and use ambitious language, albeit you need to make sure you're spelling it correctly. So when you review, it is important to have a read. So it's A, use different sentence types. So you should be using simple, complex and compound sentences, and also sentences of different lengths as well. When you write a review, we use persuasive titles. So I think this is a bit of a tricky one, this one. I think that's probably all 3. So technically, you're not showing off and trying to also show off your DeForest to the writer. You are in some ways. You are trying to show that you know how to use these techniques. But I guess the main one is influencing the reader and deciding whether they should read the book or watch a particular film. Okay, so here's your checklist I've given you for each one. So up here you've got the plan that I've given you in your books. Here a reminder of your power and your punctuation. Here's all the DeForest. Here's a typical question. This was actually from a couple of years ago, the exam. Here I've given you the intro to the A-star student version. Here I've given you a list, which is also in your film review booklet, of interesting adjectives you could use. Here is your connectives to start your paragraphs. Here's a reminder of verb and to that you should be checking it. And here's a reminder of your tips for the review. So range of punctuation, alliterate your heading, link your paragraphs, use lots of adjectives, try to use sentence starters with words ending in ly or ing, and make it interesting. It's meant to be a lively review. So recap, be enthusiastic in your review, be interesting, be accurate, make sure you're proofreading, avoid vague comments. Like I said, I want you to really be specific. Either say something's fantastic, why is it fantastic? If it's dreadful, why is it dreadful? So that's the end of the podcast on writing review. In lots of ways it's similar to the article, with just the difference being you're giving your opinion a bit more. So like I say, that's a video, so feel free to look at any of my other videos on letters, speeches, reports, or any of the formats that can come up in the WJEC Unit 2. If you look at these videos, they will definitely give you a few pointers on how to write these and hopefully make you successful in the exam. Any questions, let me know or drop me an email. Thanks.